The massive chamber stretched out like a metal canyon, its curved walls rising high above the gathered delegates. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy filled the tiered seats, their various forms creating a bizarre tapestry of scales, feathers, crystalline structures, and flowing energy. The air hummed with excitement and the constant whisper of translation devices working overtime. At the center of it all, Admiral HFY stood proud on the raised platform. His reptilian form towered over the podium, green scales catching the harsh white lights that bathed the speaking area. Each scale seemed to shimmer with barely contained triumph. His 4 arms gestured grandly as he prepared to address the assembly, while his tail swished behind him in obvious satisfaction. Honored delegates of the Galactic Council. His voice rumbled through the chamber's acoustic systems, automatically translated into hundreds of different languages. The sound carried weight, authority, and unmistakable pride. Today marks a historic moment in our shared galactic future. A hush fell over the crowd. Even the most chattering species fell silent, sensing the importance of what was about to be announced. Some leaned forward in their seats, while others adjusted their sensory organs to better absorb the coming information. The human menace that has plagued our expansion for 3 decades has finally been eliminated, HFY declared, his mandibles clicking together in what passed for a smile among his species. I stand before you today to announce the complete and total victory of hegemony forces over the Earthborn invaders. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Cheers erupted from dozens of different species, each celebrating in their own unique way. The crystalline beings chimed like wind instruments, while the gaseous entities flickered in patterns of joy. Some delegates stamped their feet, others flapped their wings, and a few released pleasant-smelling pheromones into the air. Above the celebrating crowd, holographic displays materialized like ghosts made of light. The images they showed were devastating in their finality. Human colonies that had once bustled with activity now sat empty and dark. Streets that should have been filled with people showed only abandoned vehicles and scattered debris. The lights that had marked human civilization across dozens of worlds had simply gone out. The display shifted to show space battles, or rather, the aftermath of them. Massive human warships floated dead in the void, their hulls cracked open like broken eggs. Some still burned with cold fire, while others had been torn completely in half. Fighter craft drifted among the wreckage like fallen leaves, their pilots long since claimed by the vacuum of space. Behold the remnants of their once proud fleet, HFY announced, gesturing toward the images with all 4 of his arms. These mammals who dared to resist our righteous claim to the galaxy now feed the void with their bones. The footage was undeniable, recorded by hegemony forces as they swept through human space. Colony after colony had fallen silent under their advance. Military bases had been reduced to smoking craters. Even the great shipyards that had built humanity's war machine lay twisted and broken, their construction arms reaching toward empty space like the limbs of dead giants. 430 standard cycles, these creatures have stood in the way of galactic progress, the Admiral continued, his voice growing more passionate with each word. They refused our generous offers of integration. They rejected the peace we offered to extend their primitive existence. Instead they chose war. More images flashed across the displays. Human soldiers in their crude armor falling before superior hegemony technology. Human cities burning as orbital bombardments rained down from above. The progression was clear and brutal, showing the systematic destruction of everything humanity had built among the stars. Their homeworld, the planet they call Earth, transmitted its final distress signal exactly 72 standard hours ago, HFY announced, and the celebrating crowd grew even louder. Our forces have conducted thorough scans of the planet's surface. No life signs remain above the level of simple microorganisms. In the observer section, far from the main floor where the important delegates sat, a lone figure remained perfectly still. While thousands of beings around her celebrated the destruction of her species, Commander Lee Hanna sat like a statue carved from stone. Her dark hair hung in tangled strands around her face, matted with dried blood from a head wound that had long since stopped bleeding. Her uniform, once the proud blue and silver of Earth's defense forces, was now torn and stained with the evidence of desperate battle. Burn marks scarred the fabric where energy weapons had come too close, and the rank insignia on her collar was bent and tarnished. In her arms she clutched a military data pad, its screen cracked but still functional. The other observers paid her little attention. To them she was simply another broken survivor, a living reminder of what happened to those who opposed hegemony rule. Some looked at her with pity, others with contempt, but most simply ignored her presence entirely. Hannah's eyes never left the displays showing her homeworld. Earth appeared gray and lifeless in the scanning images, its once blue oceans looking like pools of dirty water. The great cities that had sparkled like jewels from orbit were now dark smears against the planet's surface. No lights twinkled in the darkness where billions of humans had once lived, worked, and dreamed of reaching the stars. Let this serve as a lesson to any who would challenge the natural order, Admiral Kethvar proclaimed as the images faded. The galaxy belongs to those strong enough to claim it, and humanity was found wanting. The celebration continued around her, but Hannah remained silent and still, her fingers tight around the datapad that held secrets the celebrating aliens could never imagine. The celebration showed no signs of ending. If anything, it grew louder and more elaborate as the reality of humanity's defeat sank in among the gathered delegates. Species that had lived in fear of human expansion for generations now danced in their seats, their relief and joy flowing through the massive chamber like a wave of pure emotion. One by one, representatives from across the galaxy rose to speak. Each wanted their moment to praise the hegemony's success and distance themselves from any past dealings with the now extinct human race. The speeches followed a predictable pattern of congratulation mixed with carefully worded political positioning for the new galactic order. Delegate Morthak of the Silicon Collective stepped forward, her crystalline body catching the light as she spoke. The hegemony has done what many thought impossible, she declared, her voice creating harmonic echoes. They have removed a cancer from our peaceful galaxy. We propose building a monument to mark this glorious day, so future generations will remember the price of defying natural order. Cheers erupted again with many delegates nodding their approval. The idea of monuments seemed to catch fire among the crowd, with various species offering to contribute materials or labor to such projects. Some suggested placing them at the sites of former human colonies as permanent reminders of what happened to those who resisted hegemony rule. Through it all, Hannah sat motionless in the observer section. Her position gave her a clear view of the main floor, but she might as well have been invisible for all the attention the celebrating delegates paid her. The datapad in her hands remained her only focus, its cracked screen displaying information that would have shocked the entire assembly if they had bothered to look. Around her, other observers whispered among themselves. Most were minor diplomats or trade representatives from smaller worlds, beings who had little real power but were allowed to witness these historic moments. They studied Hannah with a mixture of curiosity and barely concealed disgust. "Look at her," murmured a delegate from the Methane Breathers Union, his translation device giving his words a mechanical quality. "She just sits there staring at that broken machine. The shock must have damaged her mind." His companion, a creature that looked like a walking tree with too many eyes, rustled in agreement. "I heard humans form strong emotional bonds with their technology. Perhaps that device contains images of her dead family or something equally primitive." They spoke as if Hannah could not hear them, or perhaps they simply did not care if she could. To them, she represented the last gasps of a defeated enemy, no more threatening than a museum exhibit. Some even pointed at her while discussing human anatomy and behavior with the detached interest of scientists studying an extinct animal. Down on the main floor, Counselor Vextar of the Crystalline Federation noticed the human observer during a brief pause in the speeches. His faceted head turned toward the observer section, light refracting through his transparent skull as he focused on Hannah's still form. "The human observer appears to be in severe psychological distress," he announced, his concern seeming genuine. "Her people may have been our enemies, but basic medical ethics require us to offer aid to the suffering. Perhaps we should escort her to our medical facilities for treatment." Several other delegates turned to look at Hannah, studying her with the mild interest they might show a wounded animal. Some nodded in agreement with Vextar's suggestion, while others seemed less concerned with showing mercy to a former enemy. Admiral Kethvar, however, waved off the suggestion with one of his forearms. His reptilian features showed no trace of sympathy as he looked toward the observer section. "Let her remain and witness these proceedings in full," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's amplification systems. "When we release her, she can carry word of our complete victory to whatever scattered refugees still hide in the Outer Rim territories." The Admiral's mandibles clicked as he continued, "Fear will serve us better than kindness. Let the survivors know exactly what happened here today. Let them understand that resistance leads only to extinction. This broken female will be our messenger, spreading terror among her kind wherever small groups might still gather." Many delegates murmured their approval of this strategy. The psychological impact of allowing a survivor to witness their species' formal extinction would indeed send a powerful message to any remaining humans. It was cruel but effective. the kind of calculated decision that had made the hegemony the dominant force in the galaxy. As the discussion moved on to more practical matters, the tone in the chamber shifted from celebration to negotiation. Now that humanity was officially extinct, their former territories and resources needed to be divided among the victors. Trade routes that had been blocked by human military presence could finally be opened. Worlds that had been under human protection could be claimed by new owners. The delegates threw themselves into these discussions with enthusiasm. Maps of former human space appeared on the holographic displays, with different species marking their claims and interests. Some argued over particularly valuable mining worlds, while others focused on strategic positions along major hyperspace lanes. Through all of this political maneuvering, Hannah remained perfectly still. Her dark eyes never left the datapad screen, though occasionally they would flick up to observe the proceedings around her. To the casual observer, she appeared to be a broken woman lost in grief or shock, exactly what the delegates expected to see. But something in her posture began to change as the discussions continued. Her spine straightened slightly, and her grip on the datapad shifted. The movement was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it suggested someone gathering strength rather than succumbing to despair. Finally, as the delegates became increasingly absorbed in their negotiations over human assets, Hannah slowly rose to her feet. The movement was smooth and deliberate, lacking any trace of the weakness or confusion the aliens had attributed to her. Her torn uniform straightened as she stood, and for the first time since the session began, her expression showed something other than blank shock. Most of the delegates were too busy with their territorial discussions to notice the human observer's movement. Those who did see her dismissed it as an injured person simply changing position to find comfort. None of them imagined that she was preparing to change the course of galactic history. With measured steps, Hannah began walking toward the central console. The sound of Hannah's footsteps echoed through the massive chamber as she walked toward the central console. Her boots clicked against the polished metal floor, each step deliberate and measured. The noise cut through the ongoing discussions about territorial divisions, causing several delegates to look up from their negotiations. At first, no one seemed particularly concerned. The human observer was simply moving around, probably trying to get a better view of the proceedings or perhaps looking for a way to leave. Some delegates even returned their attention to their maps and charts, dismissing her movement as unimportant. But as Hannah reached the central console and began connecting her datapad to the main display system, Admiral Kethvar's head snapped up. His reptilian eyes fixed on her with sudden alarm, and his forearms tensed as he realized what she was attempting to do. "Stop," he commanded, his voice booming through the chamber's amplification systems. "What is the meaning of this intrusion? Security, remove this creature immediately." The chamber erupted into chaos as security forces began moving toward Hannah's position. Armed guards from multiple species rushed forward, their various weapons ready to stun or capture the human intruder. The delegates who had been celebrating moments before now watched with a mixture of confusion and concern. But before the security forces could reach her, several council members raised their hands in gestures that commanded immediate attention. Councillor Vextar of the Crystalline Federation was the first to speak, his faceted head reflecting the chamber's lights as he studied Hannah with obvious curiosity. "Wait," he called out, his harmonic voice cutting through the noise. "Let us see what this survivor wishes to show us. Perhaps she has additional evidence of her species' defeat that will be useful for our records." Other delegates murmured their agreement. The idea of seeing more proof of humanity's destruction appealed to many of them, especially those who wanted absolute confirmation that their former enemies were truly gone forever. Some even seemed excited by the possibility of witnessing the final death throes of human civilization through their own records. Admiral Kethvar's mandibles clicked with irritation, but he gestured for the security forces to halt their advance. "Very well," he said, though his tone suggested he was far from pleased with this development. "But if this creature attempts any form of deception or trickery, she will be dealt with immediately." Hannah paid no attention to the threats or discussions around her. Her fingers worked quickly and efficiently on the datapad's interface, navigating through layers of encrypted files with the practiced ease of someone who had accessed this information many times before. The connection to the council's display system completed with a soft chime that echoed through the now quiet chamber. "You wish to see proof of your victory?" Hannah asked, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Despite being surrounded by thousands of beings who considered her species extinct, her tone remained calm and controlled. "Then observe the final reports from Earth's High Command." The massive holographic displays that had shown the destruction of human colonies suddenly flickered and changed. New images appeared, replacing the celebration footage with stark military documentation. The council chamber fell completely silent as pages of data began scrolling across the screens. The information was exactly what the delegates expected to see, yet somehow more devastating than they had imagined. Casualty reports filled the displays, each one detailing massive losses in human lives and equipment. Entire fleets were listed as destroyed, their ships marked with the cold efficiency of military bureaucracy. Colony after colony appeared on the lists, each one stamped with confirmation codes indicating total evacuation or destruction. Admiral Kethvar leaned forward in his seat, his reptilian features showing growing satisfaction as he read the scrolling data. "Excellent," he declared, his voice carrying across the silent chamber. "Even their own military records confirm our total dominance over these mammals. This female has provided us with the final evidence we needed." The numbers were staggering. Millions of human lives were recorded as lost across dozens of worlds. Space stations that had served as military bases were listed as completely destroyed. Even the great shipyards that had built humanity's war machine were marked as reduced to space debris. The systematic destruction of human civilization was laid out in cold, clinical detail. Some delegates began nodding in appreciation as they studied the data. The thoroughness of the hegemony's victory was even more complete than they had realized. Several species that had been particularly fearful of human military technology seemed especially pleased to see confirmation that those capabilities had been permanently eliminated. But as the reports continued to scroll past, some observers began to grow restless. The documentation seemed endless, page after page of destruction and defeat. Hundreds of separate reports detailed the fall of human outposts, the destruction of civilian transports, and the systematic dismantling of everything humanity had built among the stars. Counselor Mordeth of the Void Syndicate shifted impatiently in his seat, his shadow-like form flickering with annoyance. "Enough of this tedious documentation," he growled, his voice like the sound of grinding stone. "We have seen more than sufficient proof of your species' complete defeat. This display serves no purpose beyond satisfying morbid curiosity." Several other delegates murmured their agreement. The initial excitement of seeing additional confirmation of humanity's extinction was wearing off as the reports dragged on. Some began returning their attention to the territorial negotiations, while others started quiet conversations about the implications of what they had seen. But Hannah continued working with the datapad, her finger tracing down through report after report. She seemed completely absorbed in the documentation, as if searching for something specific among all the records of destruction and defeat. Her movements were precise and purposeful, lacking any trace of the confusion or trauma the delegates had attributed to her earlier. The scrolling finally stopped. Hannah's finger rested at the bottom of what appeared to be the final page of documentation. She looked up from the datapad for the first time since beginning her presentation, her dark eyes sweeping across the assembled council members. The expression on her face had changed completely from the blank shock she had displayed earlier. For the first time since entering the council chamber, Hannah smiled. The expression transformed her entire appearance, replacing the image of a broken survivor with something far more dangerous and confident. Her smile was not one of surrender or defeat, but of someone who knew a secret that would change everything. "Have you?" she asked, her voice carrying a challenge that made every delegate in the chamber suddenly pay attention. The silence in the chamber was so complete that even the constant hum of the translation system seemed loud. Every eye, sensor, and optical organ in the massive space focused on the holographic display where a single line of text glowed with quiet intensity. The words appeared simultaneously in hundreds of languages, each translation system working perfectly to ensure that every being present could understand exactly what they were reading. Phase 1, Strategic Withdrawal, complete. Initiating Phase 2, Long Night Protocol. Authorization, Commander Kim Tae-ho, Earth Defense Forces. Status, Terra Invicta. The text was simple and direct, written in the clean style that human military forces used for their most important communications. There were no fancy decorations or complex codes, just plain words that carried a meaning no one in the chamber had expected to see. Admiral Kethvar stared at the display for several long seconds, his reptilian brain struggling to process what he was reading. His forearms hung motionless at his sides, and his mandibles had stopped their usual clicking. When he finally spoke, his voice carried none of the confidence and authority it had held just moments before. "What?" he began, then stopped and tried again. "What does this mean? These are just words. Meaningless phrases from a dead civilization trying to maintain some illusion of dignity in defeat." But even as he spoke, doubt crept into his voice. The other delegates could hear it, and many began shifting uncomfortably in their seats. The celebratory mood that had filled the chamber was rapidly evaporating, replaced by something much more uncertain and frightening. Hannah took a step forward, moving away from the console and toward the center of the chamber. As she walked, something fundamental changed about her entire presence. The broken survivor who had sat quietly in the observer section was gone, replaced by someone who radiated confidence and authority. Her torn uniform no longer looked like the remnants of defeat, but like battle dress worn by someone who had survived combat and emerged victorious. "It means, Admiral," she said, her voice now carrying the unmistakable tone of someone who had never truly been defeated, "that everything you witnessed over the past 30 cycles was exactly what we wanted you to see." Her words hit the assembled delegates like a physical blow. Conversations erupted throughout the chamber as beings turned to their neighbors, seeking explanations or reassurance that they had misunderstood what they were hearing. The universal translators worked overtime, converting thousands of simultaneous discussions into a babble of confusion and growing fear. Some delegates began accessing their own communication devices, trying to contact their home governments or military forces. Others pulled up star charts and tactical displays, suddenly seeing their recent territorial gains in an entirely different light. The mood in the chamber was shifting from triumph to something approaching panic. Admiral Kethvar's scaled hide had taken on a distinctly paler shade of green, but he fought to maintain his composure. "Impossible," he snarled, though his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "We monitored every human communication channel. We tracked the movement of every ship in your pathetic fleet. We recorded the distress signals from your colonies as they fell under our righteous advance." He gestured toward the display, where the devastating casualty reports were still visible. "These records show millions of your kind dead or missing. Entire worlds evacuated or destroyed. Your own documentation confirms our total victory over your species." Hannah nodded calmly as if she were agreeing with everything the Admiral had said. "Oh, they were absolutely genuine," she replied, her tone so reasonable it made her words even more disturbing. "Our people were genuinely evacuating their homes and colonies. Our fleets were genuinely withdrawing from their defensive positions to predetermined coordinates in deep space. Our colonies genuinely went dark when your forces approached." She paused, letting her words sink in before delivering the crucial explanation. "They went dark because we switched them off. Every light, every communication array, every sign of life that you were looking for. We turned it all off and waited for you to declare victory." The implications of her words began to dawn on the more intelligent delegates. In the observer galleries, alien dignitaries who had been celebrating humanity's extinction just minutes before now leaned forward with expressions of growing alarm. Some began making urgent calls on their personal communicators, while others simply stared at Hannah in horrified fascination. Counselor Vextar of the Crystalline Federation was among the first to grasp what she was suggesting. His faceted head reflected the chamber's lights as he processed the information, and when he spoke, his harmonic voice carried a note of barely controlled fear. "You are claiming that your entire defeat was fabricated? That millions of casualties and the destruction of dozens of worlds was all part of some elaborate deception?" Hannah turned to face him directly, her dark eyes meeting his crystalline optical sensors without flinching. "Not fabricated, Counselor. Strategic. Every evacuation was real, but the people didn't die, they were relocated to worlds you never knew existed. Every destroyed ship was real, but the crews had already been transferred to vessels you never saw. Every dark colony was real, but the populations had been moved to installations your scouts never found." She began walking slowly around the chamber's central area, her voice carrying clearly to every corner of the massive space. "Phase 1 was never about winning battles against your forces, Admiral. It was about learning everything we could about your capabilities, your tactics, and most importantly, your psychology." The chamber erupted in angry shouts and demands for explanations, but Hannah continued speaking over the noise. "While you celebrated each victory, while you congratulated yourselves on your superior military might, we were studying you. Every engagement taught us something new about how you fight, how you think, how you make decisions." She stopped walking and faced Admiral Kethvar directly. "Most importantly, we learned about your greatest weakness, your absolute certainty that you could never be outmaneuvered by what you consider a primitive species." Admiral Kethvar's mandibles clicked rapidly as rage and fear warred for control of his expression. "You dare to mock the hegemony? Our forces control half the galaxy. We have weapons that can crack planets and fleets that darken star systems." "And now," Hannah replied with that same unsettling calm, "we know exactly how all of those weapons work. Admiral Kethvar's 4 arms trembled with rage as he processed what Hannah was telling him. His reptilian features twisted into a mask of fury and disbelief, and he took several threatening steps toward the human woman who stood calmly in the center of the chamber. "You are lying," he snarled, his voice echoing through the massive space. "This is nothing but desperate fantasy from a broken survivor. Your species is extinct. We watched your worlds burn. We counted your dead ships floating in space." But Hannah did not move backward as the towering alien approached her. Instead, she stood perfectly still, her dark eyes meeting his reptilian gaze without any trace of fear. The confidence in her posture was so complete that it stopped the Admiral in his tracks, making him hesitate just a few steps away from her. "Am I lying?" she asked, her voice carrying a note of challenge that sent chills through the watching delegates. She raised her hand and gestured toward the cracked datapad still connected to the chamber's main display system. "Computer, activate Authentication Protocol Tejo 77. The datapad responded immediately with a clear, musical chime that seemed to cut through the tension in the chamber like a knife. The sound was followed by a series of electronic beeps and clicks as the device connected to communication systems far beyond the council chamber's walls. Suddenly the air around them crackled with energy. Communication arrays throughout the massive station came to life, their speakers popping and hissing as they established connections across vast distances of space. The holographic displays that had been showing human casualty reports flickered and changed, now showing real-time tactical information from across the galaxy. What appeared on the screens made every delegate in the chamber gasp in shock and disbelief. Dozens of new contact signals were materializing on the tactical displays, then hundreds, then thousands. Each contact represented a spacecraft or installation that had not existed moments before, suddenly appearing throughout what the hegemony considered their conquered territory. "Unknown vessels decloaking in Sector 7, came a panicked voice over the communication system. The voice belonged to a hegemony officer, his professional composure completely shattered by what he was witnessing. "Sir, they are everywhere. Massive ships appearing around our supply stations. We count at least 40 vessels, all of unknown design." Admiral Kethvar's scaled face began to lose its green coloration, taking on a sickly pale shade as the reality of what was happening sank in. More reports flooded in from across hegemony space, each one more alarming than the last. "Sector 12 reporting multiple contacts appearing near our mining facilities," came another voice, this one belonging to a different species serving in the hegemony military. "These ships are not showing up on our sensors until they decloak right on top of us. Sector 15 under surveillance by unknown fleet elements. They appeared without warning around our orbital platforms." The reports came faster and faster, painting a picture that turned the Admiral's recent victory into a nightmare. Human ships that had supposedly been destroyed were materializing from advanced stealth fields around strategic installations throughout hegemony territory. The evacuated populations that should have been refugees or corpses were revealing themselves to have been repositioned to hidden worlds and secret bases that had been prepared for decades. Hannah walked slowly around the central area of the chamber as the reports continued, her voice carrying clearly over the chaos of incoming communications. 30 years of war taught us many valuable lessons, Admiral. The most important was that your species and your allies only respect one thing: overwhelming force applied with perfect timing. She gestured toward the displays where the tactical situation was rapidly spiraling out of hegemony control. "So we gave you the illusion of total victory while we prepared to deliver exactly the kind of demonstration you would understand." On the main display, something even more shocking began to happen. The planet Earth, which had appeared gray and lifeless in the hegemony scanning reports, suddenly began to change. Light started appearing across the dark continents, first as tiny pinpricks, then as glowing networks of cities coming back to life. The transformation was breathtaking. In a matter of minutes, Earth went from appearing dead to blazing with the light of billions of inhabitants. Massive defense platforms rose from concealed positions on the planet's surface, their weapons arrays pointing toward space like the spears of an awakening giant. Orbital stations that had been hidden or disguised revealed themselves, bristling with technology that made hegemony weapons look primitive by comparison. "The long night protocol is now ending," Hannah announced, her voice cutting through the stunned silence that had fallen over the council chamber. "All human forces are transitioning to active status. All civilian populations are secure in their new homes. All military assets are deploying to assigned positions." As if summoned by her words, a new voice came through the communication system. This one was calm, professional, and utterly confident. "This is Commander Park Min-ho of the Earth Defense Forces. broadcasting to all hegemony vessels currently operating in human-controlled space. You have exactly 30 standard minutes to power down your weapons and prepare for inspection. Any vessel that fails to comply will be reminded why humanity earned its place among the stars through strength, not mercy. The threat was delivered without emotion or dramatic posturing, which somehow made it far more terrifying than any angry declaration would have been. The matter-of-fact tone suggested that the humans were not bluffing or making empty threats, but simply stating what would happen to anyone who chose to resist. Admiral Kethvar stared at the display showing his forces surrounded and outgunned throughout their own territory. His legs gave out beneath him, and he collapsed into his chair as the full magnitude of what had happened became clear. The hegemony had not defeated humanity in a glorious military campaign. Instead, they had been carefully manipulated into revealing all their capabilities while human forces prepared a counterattack of unprecedented scale and coordination. Hannah looked around the stunned council chamber one final time, her gaze taking in the shocked faces of delegates who had been celebrating humanity's extinction just minutes before. When she spoke again, her words carried the quiet authority of someone representing a species that had just announced its return to galactic prominence. "The next time you declare that Earth has fallen, Admiral," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the massive chamber, "make sure you read all the way to the end of the report." The end.